Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're trying to untangle those often confused ideas. Self-love and selfishness.
Yeah.
I know it's something a lot of us grapple with.
Definitely.
And you're here because you want to get smart fast.
Oh.
That's the goal. We've pulled together, well, quite a mix. Philosophical texts, psychological views, even what people are saying online.
A real deep dive.
Exactly. Our mission is to pin down the differences, look at the history, the psychology, and the impact on society.
It's going to be interesting. There are layers here people might not expect.
For sure. Expect some surprises. Okay, let's get into it.
It's a distinction that on the surface might seem clear, but yeah, it gets complicated when you dig in.
Totally. Like, when does taking care of yourself become something else?
Precisely.
So let's start with self-love. Definition-wise, Merriam-Webster says love of self or regard for one's own happiness or advantage. Simple enough.
Very straightforward, yeah.
But the perception, wow, that's really shifted. It went from being seen as, I don't know, a bit of a moral flaw, maybe?
Yeah, like vanity or conceit.
Right. To now being seen as, well, fundamental, a basic human necessity, key for mental health.
Yeah.
You see it reflected in things like pride parades, the self-respect movement back in the day, the hippie era, feminist movement.
All emphasizing valuing oneself.
Absolutely. And this whole question, self-love, a virtue or a vice, it's not new at all.
Oh, not at all. Goes way back. Ancient Greece, really. It's kind of foundational to Western moral philosophy.
Right. Like Aristotle. In his Nicomachean Ethics, he argued self-love is actually necessary for a moral life.
Which can sound counterintuitive today, can't it? We often equate self-love with, like, greed or something.
Exactly. But Aristotle's point was different. He thought loving yourself meant wanting a genuinely fulfilling life. And for him, that meant being virtuous, courageous, fair, generous, just. He believed that when you strive to be your best self, living that virtuous life, it actually benefits everyone. Society gets better.
So it wasn't about putting yourself first in a harmful way. It was about the drive to live well, and living well inherently involved contributing positively.
Yeah, very different spin. Okay, fast forward a bit. Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the 1700s. He also talked about a healthy kind of self-love, amour de soi, he called it.
Oh yes, amour de soi. That basic instinct for self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
Wanting to be safe and healthy.
Exactly. He saw it as the root of ethical behavior, even before societies formed. Like an infant needing care. It's not malice, it's survival.
But then Rousseau contrasted that with amour propre.
Right, the tricky one, amour propre, or self-esteem. This is where it gets tied up with how others see us, needing approval, wanting admiration, status.
Comparing yourself to others.
And Rousseau warned that this focus on comparison, on being better than, could lead to unhealthy competition, conflict. People kind of lose genuine connection.
It becomes about perception rather than reality.
But he wasn't entirely negative about it, was he? He thought maybe amour propre could be channeled for good.
Yeah, he suggested that in a society where people feel genuinely represented, that desire to be well-regarded could actually motivate positive contributions. If your good standing benefits the group, and vice versa.
Interesting nuance. Okay, let's jump to the 20th century. Erich Fromm, The Sane Society. He gives us this huge idea.
Yeah.
Self-love isn't just okay, it's a precondition for loving others.
Yes, this is so important. Fromm viewed love as this fundamental human need for connection, overcoming that sense of isolation.
That I am you concept.
Exactly. Empathy, understanding that when you genuinely love another person, you're recognizing the shared humanity in them, which includes yourself. So loving yourself isn't separate from loving others, it's part of the same capacity.
So it's not selfish at all, it's necessary.
Foundational, according to Fromm.
And practically speaking, cultivating self-love.
Yeah.
It looks different for everyone. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Quiet time for one person, maybe deep social connection for another. The key seems to be engaging in things that feel authentic, that make you feel fulfilled.
So looking across Aristotle, Rousseau, Fromm, there's this common thread. Healthy self-love isn't just navel-gazing. It expands outwards.
Precisely. It connects to caring about the wider world. You even see this in social movements like feminist or anti-racist work, where demanding respect and dignity for oneself and one's group fuels the work for broader justice. Self-care enabling community care.
Okay, great framing for self-love. Let's flip it. Selfishness. How do we pin that one down?
Well, the core of the definitions, like from Psych Central or the APA dictionary, is acting in your own interest without regard for how it impacts others. Or sometimes because it benefits you, even if it harms others.
And the signs are usually pretty clear.
Often, yes. Things like a consistent disregard for others' feelings or needs, always prioritizing your own advantage, a real lack of empathy.
Maybe not feeling remorse, manipulation.
Exactly. Taking without giving back, kindness that always has strings attached, using people, a sense of entitlement. It paints a picture.
It's useful, too, maybe, to distinguish selfishness from just being self-centered.
That's a good point. They can look similar, but a truly selfish person might knowingly harm someone for their own gain. A self-centered person might just be oblivious initially, maybe overly focused on their own world, but could potentially feel bad later if they realize the impact.
Okay. We should probably say, right, that having an occasional selfish moment doesn't make you a bad person.
Oh, definitely not. Sometimes prioritizing your own needs is self-care. Like skipping a party because you're exhausted. That's fine, healthy even, as long as it's not your default mode of constantly letting people down.
It's a spectrum, then.
Totally. Pathological selfishness on one end, extreme altruism on the other. Most of us are somewhere in the middle, balancing self-interest with pro-social behavior.
Right, so we've got definitions. But I think the real confusion, the thing that trips people up, is this idea that loving yourself and loving others are somehow mutually exclusive. Like you have to choose.
False dichotomy. And it's an idea that's been reinforced for a long time through, well, various channels, theology, philosophy, social norms.
You think about some of the older views, like maybe Calvin or Kant. They seemed pretty suspicious of self-love, didn't they?
They did. Calvin, with his view of human nature, saw self-love as problematic, pulling focus from God and others. Kant, though different, also argued that acting purely for your own happiness wasn't the highest moral calling compared to prioritizing the happiness of others. Humility was key.
And then you get figures like Stirner or Nietzsche, who sometimes sound like they're championing pure egoism.
Right, but often that was a reaction against the suppression of the individual, against those very norms that demanded self-negation.
It's complex, like Nietzsche's idea that real love comes from strength, from abundance within yourself, not from neediness.
Exactly. Which, interestingly, circles back towards Fromm's core argument again.
Which is?
That it's not an either-or. Love for self and love for others aren't alternatives. Fromm says they run parallel. The capacity to love, period, includes loving yourself. If you can't love yourself, your ability to truly love others is compromised. Hatred of self is linked to hatred of others.
So it's like a general capacity, a readiness to love.
That's Fromm's idea. A basic sympathy, a character trait that exists within you and gets actualized towards an object, whether that object is another person or yourself.
Okay, now this next bit from Fromm is where it gets really paradigm shifting for me. He says selfishness isn't just different from self-love.
He says they're opposites.
Opposites, explain that.
Well, think about the truly selfish person Fromm describes. They're obsessed with themselves, yes, but are they happy? Content? Usually not. They're insatiable, always needing more, often deeply anxious, envious.
And unable to genuinely give anything, right? Because they're always trying to get.
Precisely, and Fromm argues this intense focus on getting, on taking, actually stems from a fundamental lack of self-love, a lack of inner security or satisfaction.
So the selfishness is like compensation.
Exactly. It's an attempt to fill a void left by the absence of genuine self-fondness and self-acceptance. They grab at external things because they lack internal validation. He connects it to narcissism, seeing it as an overcompensation for deep-seated feelings of inadequacy or lack of self-love.
He uses an analogy, doesn't he? Like an over-anxious parent.
Yeah, like someone who smothers a child with care. That's really about controlling their own anxiety, not about genuine fondness or trust in the child. The outward behavior, intense focus, masks an opposite inner reality, lack of genuine love or security.
That makes a surprising amount of sense. Okay, we've touched on philosophy quite a bit. What about ethical egoism? That comes up sometime.
Right. Ethical egoism is the philosophical stance that moral agents ought to act in their own self-interest. It's a normative claim about what should be.
How's that different from other types of egoism?
Good question. Psychological egoism just claims people can only act selfishly, a descriptive claim. Rational egoism says it's rational to act in your self-interest. Ethical egoism says it's morally right to do so.
And there are different flavors of it.
Yep. Individual ethical egoism. Everyone should act in my interest. Personal, I will act in my interest, you do you. And the big one, universal ethical egoism. Everyone ought to act in their own self-interest.
That last one sounds potentially chaotic.
That's one of the criticisms. But the justifications often involve arguments like, individuals know their own needs best, trying to be purely altruistic is demeaning or inefficient, or that ultimately, everyone pursuing their own good creates the best overall outcome, maybe unintentionally. like Adam Smith's invisible hand, but for morality.
But the criticisms are pretty strong.
Oh yeah, like why are my interests inherently more valuable than yours? Seems arbitrary. It can be self-defeating. Think prisoner's dilemma scenarios where mutual self-interest leads to a worse outcome for both. And some philosophers even challenge the idea of a stable, separate self that egoism relies on.
It's important to note, though, ethical egoism doesn't necessarily mean harming others, right? It distinguishes self-interest from just foolishness.
Correct. Acting in your long-term self-interest might very well involve cooperation and not harming others, because doing so could ultimately backfire on you.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Yeah. Self-love, selfishness, the false split, Prome's ideas, ethical egoism.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to something really practical. Self-care. Where does that fit? Is taking time out selfish?
No. Emphatically no. This is where the clarity is crucial. Self-care is not selfishness. It's essential maintenance for your well-being.
Like putting on your own oxygen mask first.
Exactly like that. It's about building your resources, your resilience, your capacity. It fosters positive connections, starting with the one you have with yourself. And that is what enables you to genuinely show up for others.
Whereas selfishness, as we defined it, tends to push people away, create tension, isolate you.
Right. Self-care refills your tank. Selfishness often drains it while trying to grab from others. Prioritizing your mental, emotional, physical health isn't just nice to have, it's the foundation. It benefits you, and by extension, it benefits those around you because you have more to give.
So wrapping this all up, the big takeaway feels like genuine self-love is the bedrock. It allows connection, generosity, a fuller life. Selfishness is often rooted in a lack of that self-love, leading to isolation and that constant neediness.
Perfectly put. And taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary groundwork.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about, maybe.
Consider this. How does really understanding this difference between authentic self-love and that compensatory, grasping selfishness, how might that reshape your view of your relationships or your approach to your own well-being?
Yeah, like, have you maybe bought into societal narratives that tell you self-care is selfish or that self-sacrifice is always the highest virtue?
It's worth reflecting on. Which actions in your life truly nurture that authentic and fulfilled self we talked about, and which might be coming from that place of lack? And what impact do those actions have? Really, do they build connection, or do they create distance?
Some deep questions to ponder. Thanks for diving deep with us today.